Yep. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam ajma'in. Allahumma aftah alayna futuh al-arifin wa fiqna tawfiq al-salihin. Ya arhamar rahimin. La ilaha illa anta subhanak inni kuntu min al-zalimin. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يقربنا منك برحمتك يا ارحم الراحمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى اله وصحبه وسلم الحمد لله رب العالمين والى حضرة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم الفاتحة. All right, assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Jazakumullah khair for taking the time to join. So this is a continuation of the conversation that we were having yesterday. Inshallah, so it'll be part 2 in this discussion about the end of time, the latter days. And what we were discussing yesterday were basically these shifts that have taken place and that the Prophet ﷺ described will take place as you get closer and closer to the end of times. But it's important to understand, as we reiterated yesterday, that the end of times are very much they happen in phases. It's not that like all of a sudden a bunch of things happen in a row and then time will end. That's not how the Prophet ﷺ has described in the Hadith literature. So what we were discussing yesterday was, okay, there's this whole period of time that passed where Allah created creation. He created Adam alayhi salam, the descendants of Adam alayhi salam, and you essentially had the ancient prophets, right, that came by. That was early on in time. And then a lot of messengers, a lot of prophets and messengers came from that time until the final messenger of God and the most beloved messenger of God, Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And as we mentioned, that was the first of the beginning, essentially kind of the beginning of the end. So even though it was 1440 or so years ago, it doesn't mean that it's 1,000 years, 1,400 years in the context, the grand context of history is actually not that much time, right? So the Prophet ﷺ is the first sign that this new period and this new wave has now started. Then he listed out a number of events that would occur, a number of situations that would happen after he passed, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And many of those happened, right? We had many of the tribulations that have happened to the ummah up until now have already been predicted and prophesied by the Prophet ﷺ. So we've already seen those happen. Then you get into this phase of these societal shifts that will happen. So what we covered yesterday are these 4 to 5 main societal shifts that will be taking place. And what we've been pulling from, and I don't think we mentioned yesterday, we're pulling a lot from this wonderful text written by Dr. Mustafa al-Badawi, known as Twilight of a World. Highly recommend getting it, because what he's essentially doing, just like we started yesterday with this hadith, the Hadith Jibreel, the famous Hadith Jibreel, which defines the religion for the Muslim, right? Which defines Islam, defines what Iman is, defines what Ihsan is, and then defines this 4th component of our religion, this 4th building block, known as the signs of the hour. A lot of the times this 4th component is neglected. So ulama have, mashallah, written a lot and taken from the Hadith tradition and from what the Prophet ﷺ had mentioned to pull together what are the signs of the hour that we need to know in our time. And this book was published not too long ago, and so it's very much provides context in the modern day and what we live in, what has already happened and what has yet to happen. So these 5 signs that we discussed, the first that will take place, or one of many that will take place, these don't necessarily have to happen in any order, but these societal shifts that will happen, right? You'll have the corruption of the government, corruption of rulers. You'll have the gradual disappearance of upright scholars and the replacement with corrupt scholars and pseudo-scholars. You'll have the generality of Muslims, which will grow distant from the religion, and they will lose respect. The Muslims, our ummah, will lose respect for the sacred law, lose respect for the Sharia. You'll have Muslims that will then, we will as a community start to become really, we'll start to follow the other communities. We'll start to essentially become infatuated with the West and follow them blindly. And we mentioned the hadith that indicates this. And you'll have an immense focus on the outward and not much focus on the inward. And then what starts to happen is you'll have the priorities shift. So all of these societal shifts happen. This is happening at the societal level. And there are also changes going on at the personal level, at the communal level, where the priority of Muslims, instead of being on Allah, slowly starts to shift from the heart being directed towards Allah, and then the heart starts to be directed towards the dunya and what we want from the dunya. And the heart only has room for one, Tawheed, for Allah. The heart does not have room for the dunya in the negative sense of the word, right? For the dunya and for Allah. It has room for Allah, and that's what the heart was created for. It was created to love Allah. Imam al-Ghazali mentions in his book, Alchemy of Happiness, that the purpose in the creation of the heart is to seek knowledge of Allah, ma'rifah of Allah, love of Allah. And the more the heart gets the love and the knowledge of Allah, the more, that's the nutrient that the heart needs to survive. That's the food of the heart. The more it gets it, the more it's going to thrive. The less that the heart gets that, the more it's going to fall into trepidation and worry. And then you can generally say, from a spiritual perspective, that the issues we face in our time, our stress, our anxiety, a lot of these issues will stem from the heart not being directed in the appropriate way. So that's one of the shifts that will start to happen as we get closer and closer to the end. So we mentioned these 5 societal shifts, and then at the personal level, the first one is the priority starts to change. The other one that we mentioned is the sources of knowledge begin to change. And so people will no longer respect all of the sources of knowledge, and they will start to neglect the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ as you get closer and closer to the end. And so this hadith the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, narrated in the collection of Sunan of Abu Dawud, that will one of you leaning on his couch think that Allah has forbidden nothing other than what is in the Quran, when I have counseled, commanded, and forbidden things which are as many as those in the Quran or even more, right? And then he went on to describe specific prohibitions that the Prophet ﷺ made that were not outlined in the Quran. Because the Sharia, the sacred law, is what the Prophet ﷺ, it's what is outlined in the Quran and what the Prophet ﷺ says. You have to have both. And so he mentions that towards the end of time, you will have people who will try to interpret this themselves without the context of proper guidance and without the context of the Sunnah. And the Sunnah gives the context, right? What the Sayyidina Aisha was asked, describe the Prophet ﷺ. And she said, he was a walking Quran, that his character was the Quran. Right? So how do we know what the Quran is saying if we don't study his blessed life, sallallahu alaihi wasallam? We may misunderstand. And many of the groups that have gone astray in our time have misunderstood the Quran. They'll take verses that completely out of context that were revealed for a specific situation and use that as a way to say, oh, we should attack these types of people and we should have this type of approach, not recognizing what is the example and what is the clarification that the Prophet ﷺ gave in that specific type of situation. So that's the priority shift, the sources of knowledge change, and we start to focus more on the body and on the nafs than on the spirit. And the spirit needs cultivation. It needs love of Allah. It needs regular dhikr. And the body, of course, needs its nutrients. But if so much time goes to how we look and how we position ourselves, and is the angle correct for the photograph that we're going to take at this specific time of day, and we're so careful about that image, but then how much time are we spending looking inwardly? Like what do I have going on inside? What problems exist inside of me? What diseases exist inside of me? How am I making life tougher for other people because of my character and the way I approach? That is the goal of the Muslim. Allah says in the Quran, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها. That successful is the one who purifies themselves, and destroyed is the one who doesn't. So success for us is defined as the more purity you get inwardly, right? Then the more successful someone is going to be. And the more corrupt we get inwardly, it doesn't matter how much dunya success somebody has. They can be a president, prime minister, have billions of dollars, but if the character is wrong, it's not progress for us. Progress is defined by spiritual and moral progress. So the Prophet ﷺ is indicating that your definition of progress will start to shift. And we see this in the time that we live in, that there is an obsession with dunya, with your salary, with your title, with your status, with leadership, with position. None of those things are supposed to be the purpose of our life. That's not the purpose of life. Our obsession should be, what is our status with Allah? What does Allah think of us? How strong of a servant am I being with God? How much am I pleasing Him? Even if that means that I may do things differently than everybody else. That's the type of leadership you could say we should be seeking, which is to be trying to lead the way in improving our morality and improving our efforts. And then he mentions that a number of signs of corruption that will happen. So we covered these yesterday, right? And we'll just briefly touch upon them again. That zakat becomes a burden. Knowledge is acquired for the wrong reasons. People will obey their spouses, but they're not their parents. So specifically in this situation, right, a man will obey his wife, but not his mother. The son pushes away the father and draws the friend near. Very much happens in our time today, where we will prioritize our friends more than our parents, and that is endemic in the society that we live in. It's very prevalent in our society, where parents are kind of seen as a somebody who you can speak eye to eye, treat at the same level as you. That was never our understanding. The maqam of our parents is very high, and we should always be aspiring to get there. Voices are raised in the mosque. The Prophet ﷺ has mentioned, the leader of the people are the worst. The worst among you are the leaders, right? So the one who is in leadership position is not the best among you. It should be, right, the sayyid of a qawm, the sayyid of a people, should be the best person, or should be the most qualified person. That's no longer the case. And that's actually it's been happening gradually, but it's very, very present now. We mentioned that. Right? Alcohol is drunk frequently. Women singers appear and concerts appear. They become widespread. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ now indicating the negative energy that comes when you have gatherings where Allah's pleasure is not being distributed. And we discussed this yesterday, the type of what is a good gathering, and where Allah's light and pleasure and the nur is being distributed, and rahmah is being distributed, and what is considered a negative gathering. And then he said that you'll be cheating in business, there will be no respect for elders, the nafs essentially will begin to reign, and that women will be dressed yet naked. We discussed this yesterday briefly, right? There's a hadith from Sahih Muslim, the specific one, this idea of extremely tight clothing, which doesn't necessarily actually cover, right? That's what some of the ulama believe this is referring to. And then he said in the hadith, when affairs come to be handed over to those who are unworthy, expect the hour. So what we just mentioned compiled from a variety of different traditions, but they're signs of immense moral degradation happening rapidly. And they're widespread. And somebody actually asked this question yesterday, is this only for the ummah, or is this widespread throughout society? The Prophet ﷺ will detail when he's referring to something specifically in his ummah. A lot of what we're mentioning will happen throughout society. It doesn't only mean that the Muslims have to be engaged in all this. You're talking about general societal shifts, because society has always had a moral standard. All societies have a moral standard. When that generally starts to decline and we see moral degradation at the societal level, you have problems. And the more fasad that manifests on the earth, the more fasad generally that manifests on the earth, regardless if it's just Muslims or not, the more problems we're going to have. And the more good and khair and acts of getting near to Allah that manifests on the earth, the more rahmah and the more barakah that descends from Allah from the heavens. And then generally, you will start to see situations being rectified by those types, that type of action. So that's a recap of what we've covered so far. So now today we're just going to kind of talk briefly about the major signs that will start to manifest, and then we'll get into what is the advice that the Prophet ﷺ gave and that the ulama have given for us to prepare for these times as things get tougher and tougher. To start with, if we observe everything happening before us, like if somebody tells you like, okay, you have to, if you're trying to go towards, let's say you're going to San Francisco, and they tell you, okay, to go to San Francisco, get on this freeway, and then look out for this specific exit, and then you need to take the Bay Bridge, you're gonna have to cross a toll plaza, look out for make sure that if you cross the toll plaza, you don't go in the fast track lane if you don't have fast. They're giving you the signs of what you should look out for, and then they're telling you, okay, when you get to San Francisco, depending on where you want to go, you can take the first exit or the fifth exit. Make sure you don't accidentally get on the 101. They'll give you descriptions, right? And assuming, of course, in the world without our handy-dandy GPS, alhamdulillah, right? But they're giving you directions. As you get closer and closer, you start to be like, oh yeah, they said this was going to be, look out for that big tower. As you get close to the big tower, you'll find parking, park there, and then come and let's meet for lunch in this spot, right? They'll give you general directions. As you get closer and closer, you'll be like, okay, cool, I'm getting to the place I need to go to. This is the destination, right? When you just start off, you're like, okay, I don't exactly know where the bridge is and where this building will be, but I'll figure it out, assuming it's somebody's first time. We should look at you could say, what has been prophesized very much in the same light. If the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned, this will happen, and this will happen, and this will happen, and this shift will happen in society, and you'll have this issue manifest, and this issue manifest, and when this happens, expect the hour. What is he saying? Expect the hour. I mean, be ready. Like, it could happen. Expect times to get more and more difficult. And then, eventually, he lists out specific events that will start to happen. So we've seen now I think it's very clear all of these trends have manifested, and they could get deeper and worse, but they've definitely manifested, these societal trends. So now, what does that mean? It means you're starting to get into a phase where more and more and more of a decline can start to happen. Because if the events have already manifested in a lot of ways, then you will start to see other problems manifesting. And what does that mean? Before all these major signs start to happen, the underpinnings and the plumbing for that has to be laid down. You can't build something without the foundation first being there. Before the Dajjal will manifest, a Dajjalic system will be at play. It's not just like pop up, expect things to change. The systems will generally manifest. This is how things generally work in society. You will have gradual changes as situations pop up. So we have to be aware. We have to take a look like, okay, what does this mean? When something is happening, what does this situation, what does this situation mean? What could this mean? What could this new technology mean? What could this shift mean? What could this obsession with media mean? What does all these things mean in the context of our religion? Because if we don't know what they mean, we won't be able to discern how they're going to impact our relationship with the end of times, and eventually, of course, most importantly, our relationship with God. So that's why the knowledge is the most important component, and we'll discuss what the Prophet ﷺ recommended about that. So now we get into the next phase, and these are essentially the major shifts that start to happen. So the first, although he's not described as a major sign, the first sign that's going to happen is the Imam Mahdi will manifest. Now, Imam Mahdi is a descendant of the Prophet ﷺ, and you have in the Hadith tradition, the Prophet ﷺ describes who he is. He mentions that, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, the Mahdi, right, will be one of us. He will be from Ahl al-Bayt. God will prepare him in the single night. And the Mahdi is from my family, from the children of Fatima, radiallahu anha. The Mahdi will be from the Ahl al-Bayt. And he described, he will have a thin aquiline nose and a broad forehead. He will fill the earth with justice and equity, just as it had been filled with tyranny and injustice beforehand. And then he described with his fingers how long he would live, right? And then he mentioned in another hadith, narrated in the Sunan of Imam Ibn Majah, that there are 7 of us, descendants of Abdul Muttalib, who are the masters of the people of the garden. Myself, referring to the Prophet ﷺ, Sayyidina Hamza, radiallahu an, Sayyidina Ali, radiallahu an, Ja'far, Al-Hasan, Al-Hussein, radiallahu anhum, and Al-Mahdi. So he's mentioning the Mahdi along the lines of like amazing people. So the Mahdi is going to manifest at the end. He is not, the Prophet ﷺ is, of course, the last and final messenger. He's not considered a messenger, but he is considered at the highest ranks of wilaya, the highest ranks of sainthood, from what the ulama have mentioned. And then he mentions, right, that, and the scholars mention, we know that the Mahdi's name will be either Muhammad or Ahmad, son of Abdullah. And his title will be Al-Mahdi. We know generally what he will look like. Right? It's described as having a medium height. He will be tanned, be thin, having a broad forehead, arched eyebrows, aquiline nose, black eyelids, a thick beard, scant hair on his temples. So this is all pulled from different hadith that the Prophet ﷺ described who the Mahdi will be. So it's clear through the hadith tradition, right? You have very, very strong hadith that indicate that the Mahdi will come. You can't really deny this idea. Now, when he comes, what he's going to do, a lot of that has been described of what he's going to do. And the signs of what will happen before he comes have also been described. When we've spoken about a lot of these already, right? The specific exact time and place, Allah knows. Perhaps Allah unveils that knowledge to people, Allah knows. But that's not necessarily something that's in our purview to say, okay, this will happen on this date on 2001, this specific year, whatever it is, right? But it's a it's the start now. When Imam Mahdi comes, may Allah give him immense victory and allow us to join him. The Prophet ﷺ described what will happen. And we won't get into all of this in detail just because the nature of this topic is of course very, very lengthy, and we want to focus today's discussion about what we can do to prepare as we get closer and closer to this end. But the Prophet ﷺ describes like specifically the event that will happen before the Mahdi will manifest. So we'll read this hadith, which is pulled from the Mustadrak of Al-Hakim. So he mentions that the year the Mahdi will appear, this is not from the hadith, this is a commentary, that the Mahdi shall openly, the year before he appears openly, there will be bloody events in the region surrounding Mecca. And it's mentioned in Dhul Qaeda, the tribes shall quarrel and fight with each other and act treacherously towards one another. So that the pilgrims will be plundered, the Hujjaj will be plundered, and there will be a battle. There will be fighting in Mina. When the dead will be many, and blood will flow so copiously that will flow over to the Jamrat al-Aqaba. Right? And that's a pretty significant amount of blood in this case if it's getting to these areas from Mina. Their man shall flee the scene until he reaches the area between the corner and the station. He's referring now at this point to a place at the Kaaba, where he will be sworn allegiance to. People will give him bay'ah, allegiance, even as he remains reluctant. And it will be said to him, you will accept our allegiance. You will accept our allegiance. Like they're forcing him to accept allegiance. And those who pledge their allegiance to him will be as many as the people of Badr. And both the people of the denizens of the earth and those of heavens will be well pleased with him. So you see this intense scene that will take place in the number of months leading up to before Imam Mahdi manifests. And then when he manifests, there will be people already there who are ready to pledge to him. And it's not that he openly accepts that, right? So you have in another tradition it's mentioned, the people will go to Hajj and will go to Arafat without a leader. As they are in Mina, turbulence will seize them, and the tribes will attack each other until the Aqaba runs with blood. They will hasten to the best among them, only to find him face against the Kaaba weeping, referring to the Mahdi. And they will say, come, we will pledge our allegiance to you. And he will say, woe to you, how many a pledge have you already broken, and how much blood has been spilt? And then he will reluctantly accept their allegiance. And we see this, the Prophet ﷺ now, he's mentioning, give specific advice. Should you see him, pledge your allegiance to him. For he is the Mahdi in heaven, and he is the Mahdi on earth. So the Prophet ﷺ is again explaining to us what to do when this happens. What should the Muslims be ready to do? First of all, should be aware. They're like, if this stuff starts to happen, we should know this. Okay, this will happen in this situation, then this event. Have a very clear timeline for us and our families to understand this is part of our deen. We should know, just like we know how to pray, we should know what's going to happen as we get closer and closer to the end. Because the difficulty will be people will get very confused. When fitna happens, and what's happening? Fitna is happening before he manifests. When fitna happens, we get very confused. Just a small fitna that happens in our communities, and we start to have problems, tensions, naturally, issues occur. Now imagine great fitan like this happening at God's house, blood being spilt, right? We have to understand, okay, no, this is what the Prophet ﷺ described. What does that mean? It means that Imam Mahdi could potentially manifest. And then the Prophet ﷺ describes other situations, specifically somebody named the Sufyani, right, the title that's given to him, and how Imam Mahdi will eventually fight the Sufyani, how there will be quakes that will happen in the earth that will swallow certain armies that are manifesting. And the Prophet ﷺ gives indication, right, of when the Muslims should try to seek out to find Imam Mahdi. He encourages us to say, he encourages us to say, okay, look out for these signs, right? And you have a number of these signs, so I'm just going to pull these up real quick, that he mentions for us to look out for. So he mentions there will be people from the east. Again, this is from the Sunan of Ibn Majah. There will be people from the east who will prepare the ground for the Mahdi. And there shall come out of Khorasan black banners that nothing shall stop them until they are erected. And an army is going to be expected to prepare the ground for Imam Mahdi by marching all the way to Jerusalem. And after these events, immense battles will be fought, and the victory will be given to the Mahdi and his army. And justice and equity will start to be established around the earth. So again, you have all of these now happen before the Dajjal actually manifests. So the Mahdi will come, and these situations will take place. And again, it's lengthy, and there are specific situations the Prophet ﷺ has described. For the sake of time, we won't get into all of them. I would recommend, there's actually a pretty strong talk, a good talk on YouTube by Sheikh Ibrahim Osi Efa, about the Mahdi, one whole talk, about the Dajjal, one whole talk, and about Isa alayhi salam, one whole talk. Gets into a lot of detail, and mashallah, he's a very, very strong scholar. So would highly recommend checking that out. And of course, this book, as we mentioned, The Twilight of a World, has sections and chapters on each of these. But that's what happens, right? Yeah, Ibrahim Osi Efa. Yeah. So he will, and it's mentioned that the Mahdi will be in Medina, and then he will flee to Mecca. And then he will fight the army of the Sufyani, and then a number of events will occur. Then what happens? So now, the major signs start to manifest. So the Prophet ﷺ listed out the major signs that will manifest when you get closer and closer to the end. So these are the events that will precede the major signs. You have battles that will start to take place. And then you have, in the hadith, the major signs are mentioned. So one of the first of the major signs is going to be the imposter, the Dajjal. But the Prophet ﷺ does mention other major signs that will happen. Among them, he mentions that a huge smoke will take place. The Dajjal will manifest. He mentions a creature just known as the beast. He mentions the sun will rise from the west at the end of time. He mentions Isa alayhi salam will come. He mentions Gog and Magog will come. He mentions that there will be 3 major sinkings of the earth in the east, in the west, and in the Arabian Peninsula. He mentions a huge fire in Yemen will take place. So these are all signs that will start to happen now as after Imam Mahdi, in this period after the Dajjal now starts to manifest, right? So some of these, of course, will happen well after. Gog and Magog come, Yajuj and Majuj come towards the end, as you're getting very, very close to time actually completely ending. So again, these don't happen like all within, let's say, 1 year of each other. The Hadith tradition describes them as happening gradually over time. So then what does the Prophet ﷺ mention? So now we're going to specifically talk, we just gave a high-level overview of the timeline. Now we're going to talk about the Dajjal. So Imam Mahdi will come. There will be fitna before he comes in Mecca. He will manifest in Mecca. There will be people who will pledge to him. The close people to Allah will pledge to him. There will be people who join his army. And we should all have that intention that if he manifests, that Allah facilitates it for us to join the army of the Mahdi and to give victory to this cause, because we're in a situation where Allah is manifesting one of the leaders that's been described in the Hadith tradition and who's literally going to restore justice to the earth. So everybody should have a desire to at least be a part of that. What Allah wills for each of us is, of course, going to manifest accordingly. That intention should be there. Then the Dajjal manifests. And then after the Dajjal manifests, Isa alayhi salam comes. And then you have the actual events of the end. So what's the situation in this with the Dajjal? You have a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ mentions, narrated in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, that no temptation, small or great, was created since the beginning of the world, but in preparation for the temptation of the Dajjal. So it's a very, very serious fitna. It's narrated that every prophet warned their community about the coming of the Dajjal. And so all of the tests that have built up have been in preparation for the Dajjal. Now think about it like this. If the tests that we face, and we face many tests in life, and we can't even face them, subhanAllah, how are we going to face the Dajjal? We ask Allah that we're not even here in that time. It's a very, very big fitna. Nobody should want to be here in that time to face that fitna. But we should do whatever we can then to know what the Prophet ﷺ say to prepare. And we'll talk about that. The Prophet ﷺ made dua regularly that I seek your protection, O Allah, I seek your protection from the torment of the grave and from the tests of the Masih ad-Dajjal, and the tests of life and the tests of death, and from sins and from debts. So all temptations are a preparation for this one. All of what's happened so far is preparation now as you get closer and closer to the end. Then the Prophet ﷺ mentions about the Dajjal, that between his eyes shall be inscribed kafir, which every believer will be able to read. Right? On his forehead, essentially, will be inscribed kafir. So the believers will be able to know that this man is the Dajjal. Because he will be given what are called essentially fake miracles that Allah gives him the ability to do as a fitna. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ mentioned hadith in Bukhari, should you be confused about him, it should be clear to you that there is nothing about your Lord to confuse you. And know that your Lord, your Rabb, is not one-eyed. Because the Dajjal will claim to be our Lord. He will claim to be, A'udhu Billah, he will claim to be Allah. Right? Like Fir'aun claimed to be, Ana Rabbukum al-A'la, that ayah in the Quran. Fir'aun claimed to be the Lord Most High. The Dajjal will have that type of Fir'aunic tendency to claim that. He will claim many stations, I'm this, I'm that, and then eventually he's going to say, no, I'm God. And then what happens? He has tests that he has these fake miracles that are given to him, right? And what starts to manifest? What starts to manifest? as a hadith narrated in the collection, the Sunan of Ibn Majah, that part of his test is that he has a paradise with him and he has a fire. But Prophet ﷺ warns us, his fire is a paradise and his paradise is a fire. So he'll say, get here, right? Jump into this and you'll be good. But if you jump into the paradise, that is the fire. And if you jump into the fire, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned his fire, the fire will be coolness and peace. Bardan was salam, like it was for Ibrahim alayhi salam. So it's a very strange thing to think about. I don't even, Allah knows and the ulama know how exactly this would manifest. But imagine you have somebody who's telling you to jump into a fire. Nobody's going to do it because outwardly it looks like that. But the Prophet ﷺ, what does he do? Alhamdulillah for the Prophet ﷺ, he gave us knowledge of what to do. He said, it will look tough outwardly, but jump in. Because inwardly, the reality of it is that will be paradise. And you will be cool and calm in that situation. Versus what looks to be good, but is actually bad. Remember, Masih ad-Dajjal, he's an imposter. He's trying to confuse us. His whole game will be to try to subvert what's truth and, subvert what is actually falsehood and present it as truth. And our job is to know, what is the haqq? What is Allah saying? What did the Prophet ﷺ tell us? And we stay on the haqq. And we have to start now. If we are not actively doing so, we should all make the intention to start now to living our lives as closely aligned to the haqq and to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, not even just for us, but so that when our children come and the next generation comes, they've observed enough of that to know this is how I need to live my life, just so that they are protected. Because many, 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 many people, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in his ummah, will fail this test. And so the preparation needs to be very important. What does he say? He says he will resurrect your parents. And he'll put like devils, like jinn in them. And resurrect them and say, look, if you believe in me, I'll resurrect your parents. Okay, they'll resurrect them. And then they'll say, right? Go to the graveyard, resurrect them. And they'll say, my son, my daughter, follow him. He is your Lord. But they're not your parents. He had the ability to take shayateen and put them in their bodies and present themselves as they are. But again, Allah has the ability to resurrect. So he's doing all these things that people can get confused, like, wait, hold on, right? This looks like something that God has the power to do. Well, Allah gave him the ability to do these fake miracles, it's the istidraj. It's a test. It's a big test. And then he says in another hadith, he will order the sky to rain, and it will. He will order the soil to produce, and it will. He will pass by a group of people who deny him, and their animals will die. And people who believe in him, he will pass by a group of people who believe in him, and he will order the sky to rain for them and the earth to produce. And their animals will grow immensely large, essentially, right? Their animals are getting fat, and they will have more milk than they've ever had. Now, even if you take this, extrapolate it to the times that we live in, whether this is happening on a farm or somewhere else, you have a group of people who say, I'm not going to believe in you, and their life is constrained. They're in a drought. They don't have much food. They don't have means to get by, right? They're constrained. And then you have a group of people who believe in him, and their life is easy. Things are given to them. There will be droughts that will have happened already to constrain the life in advance of his coming, make it difficult. And this is something very real we have to prepare ourselves and our children for, is like if you're a mother or a father and your children are starving and someone comes and says, I'll make it rain to make sure that you have food. You just have to believe in me. It might not be this intense, complex situation. We might just out of the nature of our love for our family say, okay, but that was the test. We failed the biggest test ever. It's these subtle situations which could happen in a momentous way, but it doesn't mean that there's like a momentous situation. It could be a situation that just happens for us in our town and we don't know how to respond. So it's a very, very difficult test because who controls the heavens and the earth? Allah does. But Allah is giving him the ability, right? And the ulama have said it could be that you think it's raining, but it's actually sihr that he's doing, right? It's magic that he's putting on you. We don't actually know how this will manifest, but we will have to at least be ready to know what his description is, right? And then it's mentioned that the terror of, so now the Prophet ﷺ is going to describe where you can go to be safe. He says the terror of the Dajjal will not enter Medina Munawwara. Medina will have 7 gates at that time, and there will be 2 angels at each gate. And this is a hadith narrated in Sahih al-Bukhari. And on the entrances of Medina, there will be such angels. There shall be angels, so that neither the plague nor the Dajjal shall enter it. And he will come, and he will arrive, let's say, behind the area of Uhud. The Prophet ﷺ is mentioning. But the angels will turn him back. The angels will turn him back towards Syria. And eventually that is where he ends up perishing, and we'll describe that. He will leave no part of the earth without overrunning it, except Mecca and Medina. The Dajjal will not have access to these holy areas. For he will come to no path of theirs without the angels receiving him with their swords. And then he reaches a certain area and an earthquake happens, and it pushes all of the hypocrites, all of the munafiqeen out of Medina. And then only the true believers are left in Medina. So Medina will expel filth just as the bellows expels slag from molten iron, right? So you're seeing this immense amount of people, and we ask that Allah protect us and our families from having any trait of nifaq in our hearts, such that we are only considered among the true believers. Because what the Prophet is saying, you might run to Medina, but if the faith is true, you'll be okay. But if it's not true, right, you'll be in a state of difficulty. And then what happens, right? You see that the Dajjal will look over, climb over Uhud and look to Medina and say to his companions, do you see this white palace? This white palace, subhanAllah, if anybody's ever been to Medina Munawwara, right, the mosque of the Prophet ﷺ is amazing. It looks like a beautiful, beautiful palace, right? And it's white from afar, from a distance. And so he says, this is the mosque of Ahmad. Then he will approach Medina to find there will be angels at the roads, and their swords will be unsheathed. They're not letting him cross that area because these are the holy cities, right? And then we mentioned that the earthquake will happen, and you will have people expelled from Medina Munawwara. So the Prophet ﷺ here is describing that some of the events. Again, there's a lot more detail here, but for the sake of time, we're not going to get into this detail. There's a lot more detail here, though, about what's actually going to happen when the Dajjal comes. We should know three things. First, right, a description of what he looks like. He's going to have kafir on his head. Number two, he will be given the ability to perform fake miracles, right? And number three, we have to do the work now to prepare for that time. And the Prophet ﷺ is indicating having a way out. One of the ways out, of course, is to be in Mecca or Medina, and that's at the time. But his miracles, his fake miracles, will be very, very convincing, as the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned, for a lot of people. And so then he mentions, right, that the coming of Isa alayhi salam, the coming of Jesus alayhi salam. So eventually, Isa alayhi salam is going to be the one who kills the Dajjal. So the Prophet ﷺ says, there shall always be a group in my community upholding the truth until Yawm al-Qiyamah. When Isa alayhi salam descends, Jesus the son of Mary descends, right? Isa ibn Maryam descends, their leader shall say, come and lead us in prayer. But he will reply, no, it is for you to lead one another. Allah has honored this community. And then it's described in detail, right, what is going to happen when Isa alayhi salam comes. So in another hadith, it's mentioned there will be a few people. They asked him where the Arabs will be in this time. And the Prophet said, there will be few and there will be in Jerusalem. And their leader will be a virtuous man. Generally, I believe this is referring to Imam Mahdi. When their leader is standing before them and leading the morning prayer, right? Isa alayhi salam will descend and he will step back, the leader will step back a few steps to allow Jesus to step forward, alayhi salam, and lead the prayer. But he will push him forward and say, no, it is for you that the prayer has been announced, so you should lead. And then Jesus will say, open the gate. And behind the gate will be the Dajjal. He will be standing there. And the Dajjal will be with 70, Prophet mentioned specifically in this hadith, he will be together with 70,000 Jews, each wearing an ornamented sword and a shawl around his head. And when the Dajjal will see Isa alayhi salam, he will melt as salt melts in water and run away. And Jesus will say, I shall strike you a blow that you cannot evade. And then he will catch up with him near a specific gate on the east of that Jerusalem area, and the Dajjal will be destroyed. So Isa, it's at this time, after the Dajjal has already wrought a lot of problems throughout the earth, that eventually Isa alayhi salam will manifest. And again, that was a very, very kind of high-level overview. There's a lot more detail into what's going to happen when Isa alayhi salam descends. How is he going to manifest on the earth? What's going to happen? There will be a period where Isa alayhi salam will rule the earth, and it will be an immensely peaceful period. But the main thing to know, right, that Muslims, first of all, we believe in this. We believe in the Mahdi. We believe in the Dajjal. Believe in the coming of the Dajjal. We obviously don't believe in the Dajjal. We believe that he's an imposter. And we believe in the second coming of Christ. We believe in this coming of Isa alayhi salam. But we have to know our understanding of what it is. And we have to be aware so that if this happens, we are prepared. After all of this happens, right, you will have, there's going to be a whole section, a whole time of a period where Isa alayhi salam will rule the earth, and then eventually Gog and Magog will manifest, Yajuj and Majuj will manifest, and then all the other major signs will happen. So it's after this time that these other major signs that we mentioned will start to manifest, right? So the coming of as we mentioned, the coming of Gog and Magog, the sun eventually rising from the west, and a number of other signs. And then that's when you get really close to the hour. And Allah only knows when the hour will happen, but He described these are the major signs. When the major signs start to happen, now the hour is close. The major signs are the ones that were listed above, and then others that are mentioned in the Hadith tradition. So that's again, overview, right? We have from the time when the Prophet ﷺ came, that's the beginning of the end, right? Between his coming and the hour, there's not that much of a time as he's mentioned in some traditions. Then you have these societal shifts that will happen where morality will slowly start to degrade. You will have immense corruption. We will have immense a lack of obedience to parents, a lot of drinking going on, a lot of drugs going on, a lot of inappropriate relationships going on, a lot of inappropriate clothing being worn, a lot of inappropriate music being listened to. The Prophet is describing all these, a lot of lying that's occurring. The rulers will be corrupt. People will no longer respect the ulama. There will not even be that many true ulama. There will be a lot of fake ulama that will be around, trying to use knowledge for the sake of status and followers and fame, and trying to be, the best, and then taking advantage of people. All of these situations will start to manifest. And then you will have more and more decline in morality. People will stop paying the zakat. They will stop respecting the sharia. They'll stop respecting the law of our religion. They will stop taking seriously the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and try to derive the religion themselves. You'll see a general decline in trying to obey what the Prophet ﷺ said. He said, when you see the people of sunnah being accused of bid'ah, expect the Dajjal, sorry. And that happens already in our time. You see people who have been on this tradition, a proper tradition, the Ahlus Sunnah wa Jama'at, the Sunni tradition of our religion, the people who have been following the Sunnah for centuries, now in the last 150 years being accused of, oh, this is innovation. As we mentioned, those people, and there's a whole chapter in this book that describes that group of people. There are people that today are just like the Khawarij of the past, and they're in the Hadith tradition, that what they will manifest, where they will manifest from, and that has manifested to a large degree. You have people who are confused about the religion. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned, you will see killing there's significant amount of killing happening between the Muslims, right? And there will be people who are kind of like mindless in their killing, and that's happening with terrorist organizations today. Just completely mindless killing between Muslims, or between sectarian issues that will happen in some Muslim countries between Shia and Sunnis. Sectarian killing for no reason whatsoever. But they believe that they are right, and somehow they're deluded into thinking they're shaheed and martyrs in this religion. Because they have zero understanding of what the Prophet mentioned. Their minds are insignificant. They have no intellect. And so they will do these types of things. That's manifesting. And then more and more corruption, as he mentioned, will start to manifest. And as these changes happen, as you have the worst people being the leaders, right? And you see people competing. We mentioned this yesterday, competing in building high buildings. They'll be competing. People who used to be in the desert will now be competing to build tall buildings. We see this manifesting in the Arab world today. There's an immense competition to build the highest building, build the tallest building. As all of these things start to happen, the moral degradation, the societal shifts, the priorities changing from God to dunya, now the setup is there, and then the signs can start to manifest as Allah wills them. And then the Mahdi comes, the Dajjal comes, Isa alayhi salam comes, Gog and Magog come, and the number of other major signs happen. So those are the signs, again, at a high level, we focused more on the first part of this, primarily because it's very clear that that's happened. And number two, because getting into the details of the specifics of the rest, we just didn't necessarily have time for right now. But happy to kind of answer questions around that at the end. Now what do we do? Now we're at this part of what do we do to prepare? What do we do to prepare? If there's this hadith that no temptation, small or great, was created since the beginning of the world, but in preparation for the temptation of the Dajjal. Bismillah. Then that's a big deal. We have to prepare ourselves. We have to have our guard on and our spiritual shields ready for this time. What can we do? The Prophet ﷺ gave us, right? The Dajjal and Shaitan, they team up, right? They're very much on the same team. So the Prophet ﷺ said, here, let me tell you how to be strong. One in the hadith he mentions, a single scholar is more perturbing to the devil than 1,000 worshippers. A single scholar is more perturbing to the devil, to Shaitan, than 1,000 worshippers, right? So doesn't mean everybody that we all have to try to become like a scholar. That's a very, very high station to reach, but we should try to learn, because he's describing your knowledge is the light that will guard you against the darkness of the devil and the onslaught of the devil. Knowledge is the absolute first thing we have to do is gain knowledge. So what do we do now specifically? The first thing we should do for ourselves and our families, we're going to mention about 5 or 6 specifics, is examine our life for major sins. What major sins are we doing that we should not be doing? And take it even more seriously than we have before. Everybody probably takes this seriously, but we should examine our life. What are we doing? Because if we're caught up in the major sins, it's going to be difficult for our heart to have the light to be able to discern what's going on at the end of times. Our concern won't even be there because we're so caught up in what we're trying to, our desires, our nafs desires, right? What are major sins? And this is for us and our families and our community. There are many Muslims, people struggle. People are struggling with drinking. I know many Muslims struggling with smoking weed, doing other drugs, going clubbing, hooking up with people on these apps. I mean, these are common realities that are happening. That doesn't mean that someone is doomed. No, everybody has the ability. Everybody. Allah loves us as a community, and Allah wants all of us to change. Allah wants all of us to get close to Him. He's on our side. Allah is on your side. Never think that, I did this one thing, God is going to, no. He's not going to forget about us. No, he's constantly trying to draw us near to Him. He's giving us all these suggestions, how you draw near to me. I want you to draw near to me. I will forgive you. He loves when the servant asks for forgiveness. Ya Allah, forgive me. Allah loves that. So we should have an attitude of trying to seek Allah's forgiveness for everything it is that we're doing and trying to help people. If we know people in our own families or ourselves, when we struggle with major sins, okay, let me tactfully, with good judgment, let me figure out how I can work on myself or with other people. So for some people, it might not be you cut that thing off right away. They may need to slowly wean off. Someone's addicted to drugs, slowly, okay, there's programs, there's ways to slowly wean off. But the heart has Allah. If Allah is in the heart will not want other distractions inside of it. But when Allah is not the strong aspect of the heart, not the strong force, you could say, in the heart, right, figuratively speaking, then the heart starts to be filled. The heart has a void, and we start to fill this void with smoking this, drinking this, binge eating this, binge watching this, posting too much. We start to fill our time, and for everybody it's different. So we start with the major sins and examine in our life. What are we doing? And study that. It's available. There's a book that Imam Zaid Shakir and Sheikh Hamza Yusuf wrote. May Allah grant His mercy to both of them and increase them. It's called Agenda to Change Our Condition. And in that book, they list out, this is how you change your condition. And it's perfect. Change our condition so we're ready for, whether it's our end, which is the most important. Our end is when our life goes. When our judgment day is when our life ends. That's our day, when we pass away. And there are many people, we all know people in our communities and in our families, just passed like this. Just passed away completely, right? Without a warning. There was no major sickness before and just passed. Or, God forbid, a car accident or another type of accident, right? We don't know how precious that our life is and our time is until we see someone where that's taken away from them suddenly. So we remove that, and we turn towards Allah with the path of Tawbah. So we remove the sin, and then we turn to Allah. That's the next step, is turning to Him with sincere tawbah and repentance. If Allah inspires us with sincere tawbah, it's a sign of His love. Because Allah says in the Quran, Allah yuhibbu tawabin wa yuhibbu al-mutatahhirin, that He loves the people who are constantly trying to turn back to Him and who are making tawbah. Tawbah is repentance. What is repentance? Imam al-Ghazali in his Kitab al-Tawbah in Ihya defines tawbah as, first and foremost, feeling remorse for what we did. Okay, we weren't able to, say we slipped up and we cussed at somebody, or we looked at something we shouldn't have looked at, or we ate something we shouldn't have ate, or we drank something we shouldn't, whatever it is that we did. Okay, we have to feel bad about it. That I shouldn't have done that. Okay, I'm sorry. That remorse, just the feeling of remorse is already now the beginning of tawbah. Just the feeling, without saying any word, astaghfirullah or anything, just the feeling. Then what we do? Then we actively engage in the second step. Actively engage in asking Allah for forgiveness. Ya Allah, forgive me. Ya Allah, help me. Ya Allah, change my life. Ya Allah, I want to be among the people whom you love and whom have sakina in their heart and whom are your favorite people. I don't want to keep living this life of sin and difficulty and stress and depression and anxiety and all of these things that we will get. The farther and farther someone gets from Allah, the more and more these type of feelings start to manifest in somebody. And so we turn to Him sincerely. Ya Allah, help me. And the anxiety that a lot of us struggle with, right? Allah can solve that with sakina easily. And dhikr and getting near to Him brings sakina. Allah bi dhikr la tatma'innul qulub. That verily in the dhikr of Allah, the remembrance of Allah, do hearts find rest. So tawbah is that first, or after we identify what we're doing wrong, we turn to Him with tawbah and make repentance. And then the third step, as we mentioned, remorse, asking Him, and then making a strong intention to not return to that thing. Like, okay, we watched something we shouldn't have watched on the internet. Make a strong niyyah, I'm never going to do this again. I'm never going to get into that act again. That's the goal. Just make the strong intention. Not like a fake, like I'll probably do this tomorrow. But no, a fake, a real intention. Allah knows our sincerity. Then we fall into it again. Okay, Allah can forgive us. Allah will forgive us, inshallah, because we're seeking His nearness. But the intention should be sincere. Ya Allah, help me. And we do this once, twice, three. After, at some point, God is just going to take the sin away from us, inshallah. He's just going to say, okay, I'm just going to remove that. I know you're trying so hard to stop doing that sin. Divine assistance comes, inshallah. Allah's tawfiq comes, and that problem is removed from us, inshallah, right? Or from our families, our children, or our loved ones. The second step, okay, is now we remove what are the minor sins going on in our life. The major ones, there are major sins, right? So you have a number of different major sins that could be manifesting in someone's life. And then you have other sins that we're doing. Are we missing our prayers? Do we miss our prayers? Do we take, do we pray once a day only? Do we only pray Jummah? Do we miss Fajr every day and we just make it up when we wake up? What are we doing? What are we struggling with? And start to rectify. Do we only turn to God when times are tough? And do we forget about Him when times are easy? What is our status with our prayer? And then we should think about, how can I rectify my prayer? The prayer is super, super, super important for the Muslim. And it doesn't mean that if we're not praying, we're hopeless. No, that the hope is all in the prayer, though. So when we start, we're not praying. Okay, if we're praying 0 times a day, we just add one time. I'm just going to pray Isha. I'm just going to pray Dhuhr. I'll pray this, whatever we can do. Then we add one more. Then we add one more. It's difficult, and it might be people in our life or ourselves who are struggling with this. Okay, don't overdo it. Help the person gradually, because if you start to tell someone day one, you're trying to fix yourself and, okay, now pray all 5 and you were praying 0 and do this and do that and eat this type of food, they'll get overwhelmed. Some people have the capacity, but most of us don't. So okay, just start slow, get up to it. Obviously, the most virtuous thing is we always pray 5 times a day at its time, at the beginning of the time, in Jama'at, for men especially, at the masjid. That's the most virtuous thing. But we identify where are we on that pattern, on that spectrum, and try to improve. The next then, right, we should think about where in our life are we doing things that would be displeasing to Allah. They might not be sins, but Allah wouldn't like them, right? Like Allah would not appreciate things essentially which are categorized as makruh. And things that will lead us into sin. So let's say, I'll give an example, going on our phones all the time, right? I'm going on this phone, I'm like, okay, let me see what's going on my Facebook, and in and of itself, right, you might not have any issue with that. But what starts to happen? Scroll, 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 scroll. Next thing you know, an hour has passed by. Next thing you know, we looked at something haram. Next thing you know, we heard something haram, right? You start to have all of these doors that open. The doors that will open into us doing something potentially questionable or potentially impermissible with Allah. So we should take that aspect seriously. The next one is, and I really believe this is a dangerous part of what is being set up for as we get closer and closer to the end, but this heavy addiction that we have to media. As a society, we have to remove this addiction to media. If we want to take ourselves, our lives seriously, the Muslim, Allah says, "Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas," that you were the best people ever sent forth to humanity. And then he describes that you enjoin good and forbid evil, that this is your duty. Your job is to go help people, serve people, go and rectify your life and do whatever you can. Help your family, help your parents, whatever capacity Allah has given you. Worship me. Allah has given us what He wants us to do, His purpose. But how is it, though, that we can be falling into the same addictions as everybody else in society? Addicted to Netflix, addicted to Facebook, addicted to Instagram, addicted to Snapchat, addicted to Spotify, addicted to Twitter. I mean, you can go on and on and on about the type. And these are now, research has shown that these are low-grade addictions. Television is an addiction, 100% an addiction. Somebody has to get there 1, 2. People now, on average, will watch 3 to 4 hours a night of television in this country. That's insane. 3 to 4 hours of night of, most of the time, mindless information entering our brain. Right? And we know more about the plots of shows, about the plots of Game of Thrones and this show and that show, than we do about our deen or about the life of the Prophet ﷺ. That's okay. We don't need to beat ourselves up, but we should question, yani, what are we doing? When are we going to change? When are we going to wake up? This is the time to change. Allah says, if you claim to love me, then follow the Prophet ﷺ. Right? He says this as a verse in the Quran. So follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. What would the Prophet ﷺ want to do with his time? What did he do with his time? Study his time. So one of the major ones that we wanted to focus on is this idea of being addicted to media. And so for ourselves and our children, what do? First is, I would highly recommend, as we go gradually, again, this is depending on the state somebody's in, we remove the major sins, we turn in tawbah to Allah, we start to remove the minor sins, and as we get, and we start to fill our time with dhikr and learning. And then we get to this point. It doesn't mean if somebody is like struggling with, let's say someone is in an illicit relationship or like goes clubbing every weekend for like 3 days in a row. It would be much better for them to just like stay at home and binge watch 30 hours of Netflix. I mean, that's much better because you're going from one to the next. It's better, right? Okay, maybe you're not praying or anything, but at least you're not in that completely haram environment, right? But for somebody who's trying to work on themselves and actively, then that's the next move. How do I use my time wisely? And time is a gift. Allah says in the Quran, "Wal asr, innal insana lafi khusr," that He swears by time. It's such an amazing creation of Allah. He only swears by what is great. This is God, the creator of the solar system, the galaxies, the universe, the heavens, and the earth. He doesn't swear by what we will swear. He swears by what is great. Wal asr, verily, by time, mankind is in loss. That mankind, innal insana lafi khusr. Mankind is in loss. What does that mean? It means our time is slipping away. We're losing it, right? We're losing it. And the barakah in our time is very much slipping away. 2-3 hours will go by and we don't even know where the time went. Let alone if we're not actively trying to fix it, weeks and weeks and months and years will go by and we're like, I can't believe all these years passed by. What was I doing? So make an active plan. What does that mean? We first curtail the social media addiction. We cannot expect our kids and our families to limit and I see this a lot, parents will come up and have a discussion of like, my kid is addicted to video games. Okay, well, this game, that game, okay. So what do you do when you go home? And then you'll see, well, at the house, the TV is always on. So like that's your form of, that's like the parents' form of entertainment. Like I just want to watch TV. It's my way to unwind, etc. But then with the child's phone, they don't want to watch TV. They want to play the game. A screen is a screen. They're going to make that argument like, oh, you can watch your screen. What about my screen? No, only on weekends, not on weekdays. Well, why are you doing it on the weekdays then? Like we have to actively, introspectively look like, okay, if we're watching something beneficial, etc. But like, what this idea of disrupting the family is the first unit. And I've seen this, I've observed this now. Looking at families who have had a strong family time, they don't have the TV on during dinner, they don't have phones out at dinner, they're very much trying to get close to each other, that they have a much easier time than building their relationship with their children and making sure they don't get caught up in the wrong things, versus a family just kind of just, you know, is struggling with always having something going on, watching something, not being able to have strong family time together, not building that strong bond. And it's so easy. You will have times, you can go to restaurants, you'll see this, people will be sitting together and everybody's on the phone. The whole family's on the phone. How? Food is supposed to be the time we build a relationship with each other. And it's okay if we're doing it. This is not at any means like a, for us to like reprimand anything. It's just, let's address it and fix it. Because which channels do we think that these types of messages, these negative messages, how will they manifest in our life? As we were mentioning with the Dajjal, as we were mentioning with the end of times, as the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, you will follow those who came before you blindly. Even if they were to enter a lizard hole, you would enter it. And the ulama have said that they're talking about the Western civilization in that instance. So even when they engage, we take the best, but we leave behind the worst aspects of that. And one of the worst aspects is this addiction globally now to media. So slowly limit our time on social media. Okay, if we're doing 1 or 2 hours a day, we cut that back to 30 minutes, 40, whatever we can cut it back to, right? If somebody has the ability to, one app every 3 months, delete it, get rid of it. We don't need to always know what everybody's doing on Instagram. It's most of the time negative for our eyes to even see the amount of images that we're seeing, and a lot of the images are not, appropriate. Or some people feel like their life, this Instagram effect now, it's a documented thing. People will feel their life is subpar to someone else's life because their life, they're seeing they're living it up, they're in, traveling the world and doing all these things, and here I am at the office. They're also probably at the office, but they're posting their vacation 3 months ago, but you don't know that, right? And they'll only post the peachy good times. We don't need to. Why should we submit to that? Just get rid of all that. What's the point? Why do we need? What is the point? Why do we need to be obsessed with having followers, and now this idea of everybody wants to be an influencer and gain all the followers? Why? If you're going to influence people in good, khair. But if you're just going to talk about unnecessary things, another hadith, the end of time will come until there will be many orators and few people of knowledge. And you will have people speaking regularly about insignificant things. We shouldn't listen, again, depending on the level somebody's at, they're trying to get closer, not use our time on insignificant things, right? Same thing goes, so that's social media. There is a negative effect. And there's positive things too, mashallah. There's a lot of good happening on social media too, not to discount that. But we have to weigh. And I've seen this for sure. If you look at the lives of the big technologists in our time, the ones who founded Microsoft, the ones who founded the early founders of Facebook, do you think they let their kids near this stuff? They know. And it's documented. High-level VPs of product at these companies, they're like, no, I know, my kid doesn't have any social media. Because I know the addiction, because I'm helping to create the addictive platform. I know what it creates. I understand that. So I'm not letting my kids near it. How can it be that we're letting our children or our families or ourselves be influenced by these easy doors for shaitan to come through? Easy doors. That's one. Netflix is another big one, right? Netflix, Hulu, all these easy streaming services. We don't know. How do we know the agenda behind the show that we're watching? If it slowly starts to influence our mindset, that's not a good thing. It's not positive. We don't know the people behind it. We don't understand. We can watch something every now and then, but I'm talking about the level where it gets to be so regular that it's an addictive pattern in our life. We can't do that. Television, same thing. And if somebody is able to, you'll see a dramatic shift in your life. Take the TV, put it outside, and put a sign up that says, take this free, and things will change. Or sell it and make some money. Whatever you can do, but get rid of the television. Immense change will happen. Use that time to kick it with your friends, your family, if you're married, with your family, and if you have kids, with your kids, right? If you have a community with your family members, right? Instead of seeing what someone's up to on Facebook, give them a call. Hey, how you doing? Long time, no chat. Right? Call our moms and our aunts and our uncles and these are all, use our time, and open a book. It doesn't have to be a spiritual Islamic book. If it could be, good. But just come home. There's so much good literature out there. Open a book and just read. There's so much we can do that's not watching shows and media and just letting the connections in our brain. I mean, you literally have an effect on the neurological connections of the brain and the dendrite connections that are supposed to be being formed as we're learning things. They're being affected negatively by the overconsumption of media. We shouldn't feel the need to always be posting what we're up to. Slow, 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 but these changes start to matter. If somebody removes the major sins from their life, they remove the minor sins from their life, now we remove things that waste time from our life. And the reason we're focusing on this one is because it's such a big waste of time. Another one, right, the influence that comes from music. Careful with it. We have to be careful with it. There's a lot. The majority of music these days is bad. Bad language, misogynistic, talking bad about women. It's crazy how much music that we listen to that speaks negatively about our women. We have to honor our women. We can't, all these rappers talking about what they're going to do to this woman. How could we listen to that? Like, how could we just be okay with that? That enters the heart. Imam Ghazali says, everything that you hear makes an imprint. Imagine that it draws something on your heart. You hear something about, like, smoke this, do that, do this to that person. Imprint, 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 till the heart is filled with negative imprints. And then we expect us to change and complete. No, we have to slowly get rid of the negative influences. Let your thoughts, we should have time where we just listen to our thoughts instead of listening to something else, right? We shouldn't be drowned in constantly having to hear something. As the Prophet said, at the end of time, concerts will manifest. They will become widespread. Concert in our ear, every 10 minutes, a new concert happening in our ear now with our AirPods, right? Like, we have to take a step back. Okay, let me just think. And for some of us, it's hard to take a step back and think because we've been listening to things for so long. Same thing, anything we consume. So this just generally applies to whatever we consume in our communities, in our families, in our homes. And lastly, if we watch something, we are condoning that it's okay. That, especially with our families. And that's a general principle we should keep in mind. So I see this happening that, like, we'll be watching like a movie with, you know, let's say this happens a lot in the Indo-Pakistani community, Bollywood movies, right? Watching a movie, bad clothing, men and women dancing, music playing, and we're just watching it as a family, and we're not encouraging lowering our gaze. We're not doing it. We're condoning that that's okay. Because you can't then go back and say, hold on, no, don't do all that stuff. It was just in a movie. Well, why are we exposing ourselves and our kids and our families to it? We shouldn't do that. We should limit that as much as possible and find other means of recreation that have some aspect of kind of this entertainment, but it's not the only thing. So that's the second area. Remove what we're doing that's questionable. The third is really don't take any aspect of this religion lightly. So we shouldn't think that, like, okay, I'm doing this, and now if no big deal if, like, it's a busy day and I missed all my prayers today. Or we should take every aspect of the religion seriously and have a serious himma in our heart that, no, I want to change. Every day I have to work hard to change. Some days will be easy, some days will be difficult, but I have a serious disposition to change. And then focus from there. Another element is we spoke about this yesterday, be very careful about what we consume, eyes, ears, but also what we eat. It's mentioned in the traditions, mentioned in the Quran. Allah says, right, eat from halal and tayyib food and do good actions. Good actions cannot manifest easily if we are not built, our bodies are not built on proper nutrients, number one, and of course halal food, number two. So we have to focus on it. If we're not doing it, okay, slowly, we just slowly, maybe once a week, instead of going out to processed food, fast food, and eating McDonald's or something, we just, okay, let me go eat at, this halal place. And maybe that doesn't mean you do it every day, but slowly, gradually transition ourselves, because the body needs to be built on nur, on light, and it needs to be built on purity. It cannot be built. Remember, when food happens, I'm sure there are doctors who have obviously a much better understanding of this than I do, but if food breaks down, it eventually, right, facilitates the development of our cells, facilitates the development of our body, and then what happens? Now that food that's entering us has a reality to it. Was it dark or was it light? It's very difficult to find, like, food that's pure light because dhikr was done when it was made, etc. But at least it's halal. Let alone if it's dark and it's, like, processed and it was, a chicken that was constrained with 10,000 other chickens in an area that had so much difficulty and fed all these growth hormones, and then take a big industrial farm and a big corporation then did not treat them in the right way, all the problems that then manifested in the meat, and then of course it wasn't cut in the name of God, and then we eat that. And then we want to like have spiritual openings. It doesn't work like that. You have to eat. The Sahaba were more careful about what they ate. More careful about what they ate, how much they ate, than they were about doing extra acts of worship. They were very careful. Where did this food come from? Is it permissible? Is it okay to eat? How about the income that it was purchased from? It was the income made on halal means, was the income made from haram means? So food, number one. Number two, our income. Income should actually be first. Examine. Okay, I mean, alhamdulillah, most of the Muslims, we always try not to work for like, weapon companies or drug companies or alcohol companies or liquor stores. But if a portion of our income is coming from that, or a significant portion of our income is coming from leverage, debt, or interest type of institutions, have to be careful. We can find other jobs, and Allah will facilitate jobs that will open up for us, right? And this is important for us to discuss with our families, right? How can we do this in a way that our families will be okay with it? The next is learning knowledge. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned so many virtues of learning knowledge. It's amazing, right? He said that the ink of the scholar is like the blood of the martyrs in one of the traditions. He mentioned that all of the people and the creation in the earth and in the heavens and the earth, including the fish in the ocean, ask forgiveness for the scholar. O kama qala. I'm paraphrasing here. These are not exact translations of the wording they use in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. He mentioned the degree of the scholar over the worshipper is like the degree of the Prophet ﷺ over the lowest of his companions. And of course, all his companions are great, but he's using this as a metaphor to explain. He said a time is coming where insight will be few, the people of insight will be few, and the orators will be many. And at this time, he says, knowledge will be superior to extra acts of worship. The time we're living in, for sure, we have to spend our time. There are not enough people that actively we understand our religion, right? Sayyidina Ali mentioned that the scholar is superior to the one fasting, praying at night, or striving in Allah's cause, and fighting in Allah's cause. And Ibn Abbas, radiallahu anh, and may Allah be pleased with him and Sayyidina Ali, that studying knowledge during part of the night is more beloved to me than remaining the entire night in devotion. Remaining the entire night in Qiyam al-Layl for Ibn Abbas, studying for just a portion of the night, studying knowledge of the deen, was a higher degree for him. So there's traditions mentioned that reflecting on knowledge gives you the reward of fasting, right? And studying with others is like praying tahajjud at night. This is mentioned in the book of knowledge in the Ihya al-Ulumuddin by Imam al-Ghazali, is mentioned as an athar or a report of the companions or the tabi'een. And perhaps they attained this from the Prophet ﷺ. I don't have the exact details listed here. So what is this knowledge then? What do we need to learn? There are three pillars of knowledge we should know. First, aqidah. Second, fiqh. Third, spirituality. Those are the three. We get those, and then this fourth one we mentioned, the knowledge of the end of times, right? Islam, iman, ihsan, knowledge of the end. That's Hadith Jibreel simplified into its core components. So what do? We first, again, if we're struggling with a bunch of major sins, don't worry if you're hyper focused on like purification of the heart. That might not be there. We have to gradually. But if we're like we've left the major sins, we've left the minor sins, or we're trying to leave the minor sins, and we're trying to get closer to Allah, and we're trying to use our time wisely, at some point the door can't open any further. Generally speaking, Allah can open any door, but without knowledge. The knowledge is very important. So what do? Aqidah, right? There are books of Aqidah that are very clearly available. We should read. There's the Aqidah of Imam al-Tahawi, one of the famous Aqidah generally studied in many traditional societies. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf has an amazing translation of that book. He has a whole talk that's available, I believe, on YouTube of that. We should just go that. If we can study with a scholar today, that would be best rather than only watching something. But read the book, study it. Aqidah, most of us know, like God, who is Allah, how you know Allah by knowing what Allah is not, by knowing what essentially negates, right, the attributes that are impossible for God. We understand who the messengers are, who the angels are, the books are. We believe in all that, but a proper understanding of Aqidah will give us the ability to know, especially at the end of times when the Dajjal could manifest. Hold on, wait, no, that's not what I studied. Aqidah, my creed, my belief is this. Allah can't do this, and thus there's no way that could be God. The knowledge is clear. There's a statement that knowledge is a light, and it guides you. It's like darkness. If this room was dark, we couldn't see. But the minute the light turns on, even just a little candle or a little light or a little flashlight from our iPhones these days that we use, right, that immediately illuminates the room. Knowledge is like that. It'll illuminate us and help us understand. That's the first. Second, basic fiqh. We should know basic fiqh. We should know the law behind our prayers. First is wudu, then our prayers, and then of course fasting, zakat, and hajj. And you don't have to learn hajj till you make hajj, fasting until fasting becomes obligatory on you, etc., etc. But zakat becomes obligatory on you. But for most people, those first four are going to be obligatory, and then hajj when somebody makes it. Wudu is not difficult to learn, but we should know what is allowed in wudu and what is not. What can we wear on ourselves, on our nails, all these things for wudu to count, and what can we not? The ulama have detailed this. There's no room for interpretation anymore. It's already detailed. Look, this is okay, this is not. This is how you make wudu. This is the condition where tayammum is permissible. I've seen situations where like the water is close by, but it's just difficult. Someone was inconvenienced, like, okay, I'm just going to make tayammum. That's not how it works. It's not about convenience. It's that the water is there. The water is there. Just go, remove a jacket and make the wudu, and it'll be okay, inshallah. Right? What consists of wiping over socks? Which type of? I mean, this is getting into details, but like knowledge is important, right? So fiqh is like, it's definitely not plastic, but imagine this was glass. Fiqh is like the glass. It's the boundaries. And the water inside is the spirituality, right? The goal of life is to attain that, and then eventually you taste it. It's not just the glass. You don't just learn fiqh for the sake. You learn the fiqh so you can worship and get closer to God. That's the whole point of fiqh. It's not just I memorized all these facts, never apply them. But you have to know the facts. Otherwise, you won't have the boundary. And if this water did not have boundaries, it would just spill everywhere, and it would be useless for us, right? So it's really important to learn it. We should, if depending on our school, there's 4 traditional schools in the Sunni tradition: the Hanafi school, the Shafi school, the Maliki school, the Hanbali school. Easy, there's books like the Hanafi school. There's a great book translated by Sheikh Faraz Khan called Ascent to Felicity. It lays out the key acts of worship, the key rules around the acts of worship. Read that, if we can, memorize part of it, and that's it. We know what makes our prayer count, what doesn't make it count. Like you'll see this a lot of times in the Hanafi school, at least. Standing for prayer is one of the pillars of the prayer. So if you could get out, like let's say you're traveling somewhere and you could get out, it's a fard prayer, but you're just like, oh, let's just keep moving and pray in the car. It doesn't work like that. You have to get out and pray, because standing is one of the conditions. Your prayer will not count if you don't stand, if you have the ability to stand. It's different if you're injured, you have to sit on a chair, but standing is a critical part of it. We have to know, what are the arkan of the prayer? What are the pillars of the prayer? What are the wajibat of the prayer? What are the sunnah of the prayer? What are the adab of the prayer? At least we should know the arkan and the wajibat. Similar for wudu, like the basics of the wudu. In the Hanafi school, you don't have to rinse the mouth and the nose for the basics of wudu. You just here, your arms and your legs, your feet. If just enough water, let's say, do the basics, or you don't have time to do the rest, and of course the masa over the head. But these are examples, right? Of we should know, okay, and it'll take us 2 hours to learn this. Go on Seeker's Guidance is a great resource. Go on Seeker's Guidance, free courses, enroll in fiqh of whatever school somebody wants. But don't do this. Don't open the Quran and try to learn your fiqh directly from the Quran. You're not going to be able to do it. The Quran doesn't tell you how to pray. Allah does not detail exactly in the Quran all the steps of wudu. You will get confused. It's important to have scholars who were generally connected to, and if at least trying to learn from them. Allah says in the Quran, فَاسْأَلُوا الْأَهْلِ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of dhikr, or the people of knowledge, if you don't know. These things we don't know, we learn, then we know them. The next one is the spiritual path, spirituality, tasawwuf. Very, very, very important. We should all have a serious effort to try to get closer. What is this spiritual path? It's the desire to inculcate sincerity and be in a sincere state where the heart is directed towards Allah. Whatever name somebody wants to call it, they can call it. Traditionally in our religion, it's been called tasawwuf, Sufism, having a spiritual tariqah. That's what it's been called in our religion. Anybody who has an issue with that, just study the religion and you'll learn there's no issue with it. That's the Hadith Jibreel. What happened with Hadith Jibreel? You had Islam, around Islam, the pillars, right? The pillars of Islam, the wording that was used to describe how to attain, how to pray, how to fast, was generally the fiqh. You had then the wording that was attained and how to, the wording that was eventually codified in our religion on how do you believe in Allah, what do you believe about the angels, the Iman component, generally known as Aqidah. And there were other words that then formed after that. And then the wording that was formed in our tradition for what do you do to attain ihsan in this hadith, that it is, what is ihsan? It is to worship God. When Jibreel alayhi salam asked Prophet, it is worship God as though you see him. But you do not see him, so know that he sees you. The wording around that, on how do you attain this state of ihsan, was known as tasawwuf and tazkiyah. Same, purification, trying to attain the state of purity, right? So that's important. Having a spiritual path is very, very important. At least the basics. We should know what are the basics. We remove the bad, we add the good, and we focus our life on virtues. That is the basic path of spirituality. And we try to keep improving. That's ihsan, right? There are many books that are important here. One, Purification of the Heart, excellent book to help us attain this state of purity of the heart so that we can direct our hearts towards Allah and be ready as we get closer and closer to the end. This is knowledge that's very important. And it's fard ayn. These three knowledges are fard on the Muslim. Aqidah, fiqh, and spirituality. They're fard on the Muslim for us to learn the basics of it, not the deep dive of it. We don't all have to know how to perform a marriage or the business contracts, the fiqh of that. But we have to know how to make wudu, how to pray, how to fast, what is the meaning of prayer, how do you attain khushu in prayer, what is the meaning of fasting, what is the point of this, how do you get close to Allah. These are important for the Muslim to know. What do we believe about Allah, of course, as we mentioned. There's a book, Purification of the Heart, as we mentioned. It's an excellent book. There's another book called The Book of Assistance by Imam al-Haddad. May Allah benefit us through these great ulama. And that book has been translated in English by Dr. Mustafa al-Badawi. The same, Dr. Mustafa al-Badawi is the author of this book that we've been referring to, Twilight of a World. He translates many of the books of Imam al-Haddad. Highly recommend reading that book. Another book that's good for the heart and for all of these three is known as The Beginning of Guidance by Imam al-Ghazali, Bidayat al-Hidayah. These books, we should, 5 minutes a day, we can read them. If we take BART to work, read them on BART or under subway. Read them when we get home, read them in the morning. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It's not like we have to devote like a university degree, like 4 years at a university to study all this stuff. No, just 10 minutes a day and our knowledge will increase substantially. So that's the first, remove the bad, we make tawbah, we start to remove the minor sins, we start to remove the things that waste our time, and then we spend as much of our extra time on learning knowledge as possible and emphasizing the spiritual path and how to purify the heart. Because the heart that is pure is discerning and it can understand what's happening around it. The pure heart has that ability. Allah gives it the ability. Allah gives special knowledges to the heart that's pure. It's mentioned in the books. Imam Ghazali mentions a whole section in his book of Marvels of the Heart. What is this path towards purity and attaining this special knowledge directly from Allah? It's possible, but it takes effort. And Allah says, verily, those who strive in our way, we shall guide them. If we strive, Allah will guide us. He'll help us. He'll make the path easy for us. And then the next thing we do, we add in dhikr. We spend our time doing dhikr. Imam al-Ghazali mentions the heart gets sick if it doesn't have three. Just like I was getting thirsty, so I need water. The heart gets thirsty and it needs three to survive. It needs knowledge, regular doses of knowledge, regular doses of dhikr, regular doses of love of Allah. Knowledge we just mentioned. What is dhikr? Allah says in the Quran, فَذْكُرُونِي يَذْكُرْكُمْ. Remember me and I will remember you. Think about me. God wants us to think about him a lot. It's like he wants us to really, really think about him. Think about him, remember him, do dhikr. What is dhikr? You remember someone so that you don't forget, right? We're doing dhikr so we remember Allah. We try to figure out how will it be when I'm with my Lord. And the sakina descends. And Allah bi dhikrillah, that's ma'innul qulub. That verily in the dhikr of Allah, the heart finds rest. And it's mentioned in the traditions that at the end of times, people will survive. There will not be much food. The drought will be occurring at the time of the Dajjal, and they will be surviving on dhikr of Allah. How can you survive on dhikr? How does that make sense? They'll be surviving on La ilaha illallah, on Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar. They'll be surviving on dhikr. How does that work? Well, if somebody has tasted the sweetness of dhikr beforehand, inshallah, Allah enables them, if they're in that time, to survive on that dhikr at that time. But the tasting the sweetness of dhikr first takes getting accustomed to it and doing it regularly, right? So what do? We spend our time understanding that the heart, it needs regular cleansing. Dhikr polishes the heart. It cleans the heart. And the heart needs light. It needs dhikr to function. So we spend our time. Allah says in the Quran, make abundant dhikr, dhikran kathira, right? Like make a lot of dhikr, a lot. So spend our time, in addition to gaining knowledge, and doing that. What are the practical steps for dhikr? Well, first is our prayers. The prayer is the best form of dhikr and the best form of remembrance. Then we start adding in the sunnah prayers. Then we start adding in the sunnah du'as that the Prophet ﷺ made. So you have your fard prayers, your sunnah prayers. Then the sunnah du'as the Prophet ﷺ made. So he used to make du'as every morning and every evening. There are compilations that these are, some of the ulama have compiled one beautiful one known as al-wird al-latif, the subtle litany. Imam al-Haddad, the author that we were referencing, may Allah increase him in his station and benefit us through him. Imam al-Haddad compiled the du'as from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ just into this. It's like 10 minutes. You can search it on YouTube and listen to it on your way to work or read it in the morning. But it's exceptionally beneficial because you're asking Allah for all this protection, for all this khair, for all this ease. Yes, there's a question. Yeah, the name of this is Wird, W-I-R-D, Al-A-L, Latif, L-A-T-I-F. And although generally I would not recommend it, a brief search on Google and you can find like a PDF of it, download it to your phone, search on YouTube. It's a very, very famous, throughout the world it's recited. So you can just listen to it, like just again in your car in the morning. The Prophet ﷺ would do this every morning. Not this specific exact order. We don't always know the order, but the ulama took whatever they found from the hadith and they compiled it. So it includes like the different, the Surah Al-Ikhlas, the Mu'addatain, the different verses from the Quran. The Prophet ﷺ would do different adhkar like Allahumma inni as'aluka khayra hadha al-yawm wa fathahu wa nasrahu wa nuruhu wa barakatuhu huda, a famous dua that's recommended. Oh Allah, I ask you for the good of this day, for the openings of this day, for the light in this day, for the barakah of this day, the guidance of this day, all this amazing. And then the more someone does that, what does this dhikr do? Strengthens the heart. And it makes the heart pure and soft and soft and soft. And so the more that we can do, the better it is. Yes, question. Oh, Google. I meant I wouldn't usually recommend like just searching religious things on Google, like as the first source of truth, because Sheikh Google is not the type of sheikh we want to go to. Sometimes people have questions. There's sites that have it, but like I wouldn't recommend just going Google for everything on religion related. Go to somebody who you trust, who you're able to get knowledge from. Try to learn ourselves, and then last resort we should go there. But in this case, it's openly available. Just with a Latif PDF, you can get access to it. What else did Prophet ﷺ recommend doing regularly? 3 surahs from the Quran: Surah Yasin, Surah Waqia, Surah Mulk. Regularly, we should be reciting those surahs if we can. Again, build up to it. 1 year, we add in the first sunnah dua or the first sunnah dhikr. The next year, we add in the next. The next Ramadan, this is not supposed to be done tomorrow. If we're not doing, we just slowly. Surah Yasin is mentioned. Whoever recites this in the morning, they will get what they intend. So we recite it. If we can recite it in the morning, with the intention for barakah in our day, protection from all the fitan, it'll be good for us. Surah Waqia, chapter 56 in the Quran, is mentioned. Whoever recites this after Maghrib will not experience the difficulties of poverty, or not experience poverty. So it's also seen as a way to increase risk. Surah Mulk is mentioned. Whoever recites this before sleeping, after Isha, generally before sleeping, they will be protected from the trials of the grave. So these are protection. We're just building shields. So you build prayers. Prayer is the first shield. Actually, wudu is the first shield. Wudu is the shield for the believer. The prayer is the shield. Then after that, sunnah prayer is the next shield. Nawafil prayers, next shield. Sunnah dhikr, next shield. Quran, more shield. Then you add in, okay, we should try to be regularly reading from the Quran. Ulama recommend, half a juz, half a sapara or juz a day if we can, or a few verses, whatever we can do, 1 page. But eventually, like let's say Ramadan is coming up and Rajab is about to start. We're almost in Rajab now, like 2 or 3 days away from Rajab. Rajab wa Sha'ban, then Ramadan, right? Allahumma barik lana fi Rajab wa Sha'ban wa balighna Ramadan. That was the dua of the Prophet ﷺ, that to put barakah in Rajab and Sha'ban and to allow us to reach Ramadan. And in Ramadan, okay, many people try to read some Quran. Whatever we do, we should try to keep up to at least 75% of it. The social media heavy life will suck us back in really quickly. And the time that we could have spent on Quran, we're now spending on Instagram and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, you know what I mean? But we could have spent that time getting closer to Allah and adding more light and light and light. Now remember, as we get closer and closer to the end, the heart needs a lot of provision to prepare. So it may seem like, oh, this is a lot. Well, we need to prepare. Doesn't mean we have to do it all at once, but we should, for ourselves and our families, try to get the heart in this place where we are ready. Then the next suggestion is to add in the tahajjud prayer, the prayer before Fajr time. Immense khair in the prayer, the tahajjud prayer, right? Where generally any prayer considered praying after Isha, Nawafil prayer would be considered Qiyam al-Layl, which is high virtue in our religion. The best prayer after the prescribed prayers is praying at night, as we see in one of the traditions. But the Tahajjud prayer generally is in the last third of the night, right before Fajr, the last third of the night. So we should try to wake up 10 minutes before Fajr, pray 2 rakat Tahajjud slowly, once a month, once a week, then eventually more often, or whatever slowly we can do. But light enters the heart. Tahajjud is a huge source for light in the heart. Wilaya is very difficult to attain according to the ulama without somebody being regular in this. And some say impossible to attain without that, the sainthood, nearness to Allah. And the saints are the ones who are going to be very close, inshallah, and fighting with Imam Mahdi when that time happens. So our goal for all of this is there's 3 paths that somebody can take. There's called the Ashab al-Shimal, the people of the left hand. Ashab al-Yamin, this is from Surah al-Waqi'ah, the people of the right hand. And then the Muqarrabeen. There's the path of where we don't want to go. We ask Allah protection, but essentially the path of damnation, you could call it. Then there's the path of salvation. And then there's the path of sanctification. The path of salvation, the Ashab al-Shimal is somebody, at least for a period of time, if not for longer, will end up in the fire. The Ashab al-Yamin is the people of the right hand. It's a very, very high, amazing station. Allah describes in the Quran, right? They will have Jannah and they will be given all these amazing gifts. And then there's the outstrippers, the muqarrabeen, the sabiqun bil khairat, the path of sanctification, trying to attain the state of wilaya. That is the path that in this time we need as many people as possible trying to attain a state of wilaya and becoming Allah's friend. Wilaya is being friends with Allah, being a saint, being amongst the chosen ones of God. And how do we do this? Following the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, doing what he did, and the main sign of the wali is abundant dhikr, always doing dhikr. Dhikr, learning, khair, trying to do good, right? That and of course having good akhlaq, it doesn't mean you do have people who pray and do all these things, but then they have terrible akhlaq with people. No. The wali has extremely good akhlaq as we see in the books. The books mention, this is what Allah mentioned in the Quran, the traits of the wali. إِنَّ الْأَوْلِيَاءَ اللَّهِ لَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. That the awliya of Allah, they're not stressed, they're not worried, they don't have grief, they don't have anxiety, they're in the state of trusting in Allah. It takes time though, right? Dhikr, knowledge, the heart needs these in order to strengthen, to attain this state. So then we add in another prayer to add in the sunnah of duha, salat al-duha, 2 rakat prayed, generally 15 minutes after sunrise up until 10-15 minutes before dhuhr, before the zawal time. Very good prayer to add. The Prophet ﷺ regularly prayed the duha prayer. He describes immense benefits in khair in the duha prayer. So these are examples. So we start with the fard prayers. We add the next layer of this force field and the shield we're trying to build, sunnah prayers. Then the nawafil. Then the sunnah dhikr. Then adding more Quran in. Trying to do a juz of Quran, one full chapter of the Quran or one full section of the Quran every day. 30 juz in the Quran. If we can do one every day, khatam a month, right? And it's doable in our time. It's doable. It just takes a little bit of time. We can start with 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but like easily if somebody, let's say, commutes to work, you can have it on your phone, you can read it on your BART ride, on your subway ride, 15 minutes one way, 15 minutes another, you'll get a whole juz done, or half a juz done, depending on someone's familiarity or speed, right? But like, there's a lot of khair. Oh, your life will change completely. If somebody's doing all of this, their life will start to change. Their thoughts will change. Their approach to change. What the heart is occupied with will change. The heart's not going to care so much about like, oh, this guy at work said this to me and this situation and, getting caught up in all that. It's going to be like Allah, Allah, Allah. That's what the goal is, to get the heart to just always be thinking about Allah. And then everything else becomes like, okay, I can handle this. This is at least what the Prophet ﷺ has recommended to us. And then specifically, right, we mention in the, he mentions for the end of times, Surah Al-Kahf. It's mentioned in the hadith, in the hadith narrated in the collection of Imam Muslim. He or she who learns 10 verses from the beginning of Surah Kahf shall be protected from the Dajjal. In other traditions, who recites Surah Kahf every Friday. This is the time, we are living in the time we should be familiar with reciting Surah Kahf, the chapter The Cave, chapter 18 of the Quran, regularly every Friday. At least listening to it. If we can't read in Arabic, we read it in English, right? The goal is to recite it in Arabic, though, to get the virtue, but read it in English. We contemplate it. We listen to it on YouTube. Then eventually we start to read it, though, right? Slowly, slowly, slowly. And if that means that we only read 10 verses, alhamdulillah, read the 10 though. Don't stop. Shaitan will try to get you to all or nothing. I think Surah Kahf is like 110 verses. Shaitan's like, dude, you really gonna read 110 verses? Like, come on. It's Friday, it's chill day. Just relax. Everybody at work, hanging out, working from home. What's the big deal? 110 verses? Like, it's a lot. Okay. You defeat Shaitan, I'm gonna read 10. Read the first 10. Just get those done. The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever learns these 10, it's a good thing, right? And the next week, okay, I'm gonna read 15. And then 20. And it might take like 10 weeks, but you will get to the whole thing. And then when you get to the whole thing, now that's a major light that's protecting you. Because that's one of the recommendations specifically prescribed for the end of time. But the more sunnah du'as we're doing every day, every week, there are sunnah du'as the Prophet would do every day. There's sunnah adhkar he would do weekly. Then there's certain sunnah that he would do yearly, right? In Ramadan, there's different things that are done, like itikaf and others that are not done every day. So we should know, what did he do when? And we should try to follow. And the last one is just keep in mind who we are following. Our goal is to follow the best of creation, Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We should have immense love for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is the shortcut for all of this. The heart that is in immense love for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We know about him. We know about what he looks like. We're yearning for him. We're hoping that we're going to see him in our dreams. We're hoping that he's going to be pleased with us. We are trying to attain nearness to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We should know that that's one of the shortcuts to attaining closeness to Allah. It's one of the immense shortcuts, and it's so much proof in the hadith tradition. There are people in this time who try to say that there is a such thing as you can go too far in your extra love for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Oh, please, that's impossible. You can't. Allah praised him in the Quran. وَرَفَعْنَا لَكَ ذِكْرَكَ. And we elevated your mention. If Allah, the creator of the universe, heavens and the universe, is praising Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what does his name mean? Muhammad, the one who is praised. He's praising him. He's going to give him the highest maqam al-mahmud on the day of judgment. He's attaining all of this. And you think it's impossible to be too in love with him? No. People are in love with their phones. People are in love with pop stars. People are in love with sports players. You are in love with whoever you like to follow the most. And the habits of who you follow the most. That's who you're really in love with. So people will be in love with all of these others, and I see that as soon as you start getting too much into like love, like, whoa, brother, hold on, you're talking a little too much about. No. There's no such thing as that. It's you love the Prophet immensely. He said, until your iman will not be perfected till you love me more than everybody. That takes a lot of work in our time. The Sahaba, it was there for them naturally. It was because they saw him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his beautiful face, his immense character. They fell in love with him. We don't get to do that. We don't, that's not, so what do? We do salawat. We read about him, right? We go to gatherings of salawat. We go to gatherings where he's being discussed, conferences, seerah, learning the seerah. We do salawat. We sing nasheed. All the things. That's to cultivate the love. It's just a means to cultivate the love. If you want to get really strong, you got to work out at the gym. You can't just be like, I'm going to become strong one day. No. But if you actually look, example in the life of the Sahaba, they were trained in the desert background. Many of them naturally were strong. They didn't have to like go and do bench presses. Bench press is something that is now necessary, but in older societies, they just naturally had those muscles. But we have to do the work now if somebody wants to have those muscles. Someone wants to have the spiritual strength and the immense love and connection, they have to put in the work. These are simply means to put in the work. Everything else, just ignore it. It's just a waswasa of shaitan. He's just trying to create fitna within the community. And then you have people, they spend so much time debating all this stuff, and they don't do any dhikr. Not spending their time in doing dhikr or salawat, but just debating what's good, just anybody who's trying to encourage us to not love the Prophet ﷺ or mention all that, just okay. Just focus on what you got to do. I'm going to do what I got to do. But this is what the Prophet ﷺ has recommended. Immense love for him, following his sunnah. And love comes with sunnah. It's not just about it existing in the heart. We should follow his sunnah, follow his law, follow what he told us to do. And lastly, and inshallah we will end with this, we just know that this is tough, but Allah will assist us. Allah says, فَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. That whoever has taqwa of Allah, Allah will give them an exit strategy. He will give them. So if we are spending our life trying to better ourselves, removing the big sins from our life, turning to Allah in sincere repentance, trying to work on ourselves, trying to remove the minor sins of our life, the sins of the tongue and lying and cursing and talking smack, and the sins of the ears and the sins of the eyes, all of these sins, trying to be respectful towards people, especially our parents. We're trying to do what it is that we need to do. And then we try to stop wasting our time, remove the negative technologies from our lives, or at least curtail our use of them, trying to get closer and closer to living a life where our heart is regularly directed towards Allah, and then trying to learn knowledge, trying to add in more dhikr. If you do all of that, first of all, it's not possible without Allah facilitating it. But if someone is doing all that, Allah inshallah will facilitate. He'll give tawfiq. And then the trying times that we're living in, we need shields. We need to be shielded. We need to build this fortress around us, spiritual fortress. But if somebody tries, Allah will assist inshallah. He'll give the tawfiq. The spiritual fortress will be built inshallah. And then inshallah, Allah will protect us from all the tribulations and the fitan in our time and in the time to come and in the generations after us, for whoever is around until these major fitan manifest. And inshallah, Allah will protect us at that time. Allow us to join the side of good and not the side of evil, and protect us from the Mahdi. Allow us to protect us, from the Dajjal. Give us the ability to be with the Mahdi alayhi salam. Give us the ability to be with Isa alayhi salam, and give us the ability to close out this life with all khair and all good whenever that last day is for us. Keep that in mind. That last day for us is not when the hour comes, when the day happens in this world. The last day is when we pass, and we don't know when we're going to pass. So this should be an active pursuit, but just know that actions are by their intentions. So if we make the intention that we want to change, Allah will facilitate our life and make the change easy for us. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Inshallah, if anybody has any questions, otherwise we will go ahead and end. Yes. Right. 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 Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. So that's okay. I see what you're trying to ask. So just to repeat the question, it's that there's a lot going on in our society, and especially when we see some of these minor signs, we see them manifesting, and then we see what could be kind of trends towards a major sign, right? We might see, not the Dajjal, alhamdulillah, but it might be a kind of a system that's being set up that is almost preparing for that, right? So what do we do? How do we do we accept that? Is that a major sign? Is that a minor sign? So, excellent question. We understand what the shifts are going to be, right? That much is clear. What the moral shifts in society are going to be. Those are happening in front of us, for sure. And this, I actually would say that believe. A lot of people will be like, "Oh, come on, you're tripping. Like, why are you thinking so much about this? Just relax, enjoy life." I would say, like, go in the other end and like, no. I'm gonna really serious. I'm gonna think about this. Allah says in the Quran, "Afala taqilun." Like, do you not use your intellect? Do you think about it? Okay, hold on. Before the Dajjal comes, there's going to have to be shifts in the society. There's hadith, Prophet mentions many imposters will come before the Dajjal, and a system has to get ready in order for that to happen, right? So there is a system at play. When you're the question about media addiction, let's say, the system for how else could you communicate? This is the first time in the first period in human history where something can happen in one country and immediately it's notified across the world. Like, we know how many people, and may Allah remove this tribulation of this coronavirus, we know exactly how many people have the virus in this country, that country, this country, how many deaths there have been. I mean, even though the countries are across the world from us. that information can spread wisely. So it has its benefits, but it also has its harms. And so we have to be prepared. So it's the major signs are the major signs. So it's not the major signs necessarily, but the preparation and the groundwork and the framework, I mean, that's been being laid down for quite a long time. And it's still being for that to eventually manifest. Because it's not like something will just manifest immediately without us having some shift towards that. The minds and the hearts of people have to be ready to absorb what is going to happen. And again, we have to keep in mind, like, Satan is real. He's a very real player in all of this. And his homie is going to be the Dajjal. And they're going to be trying to, like, mess things up together. So there's preparation being going on at all levels. You do have, and I don't have enough specific information, but you do have like a lot of, this idea of the one eye becoming popular, people like go doing certain symbols which are either satanic symbols or symbols that will allude to this one eye, right? Like as that becomes more and more popular, of course people are going to be familiar with that concept, and that could be laying into things. So I don't think there's anything wrong with what you're mentioning. We should be mindful, what does this mean in the context of the time we live in? That's actually, I think, from intelligence. The major signs, though, once we study them, they're the major signs, right? The specific major signs describe the Prophet ﷺ, and they will start after the time the Mahdi will come, and then these major signs will start to manifest. At least I believe that's the order that it will go. Does that answer the question?
Yes, yes. Okay. And we don't know when the Mahdi will come, right? So we don't know when to be sure to be on that side of the Atlantic.
Good question. Yeah, no, we don't know when that will happen, but if we are doing what it is we need to do, and we study it, and again, there's a lot more detail. Like I barely glossed over it. There's a lot more detail. I didn't feel I didn't have the time and didn't really even feel qualified to get into all of the different details regarding these amazing, intense events that will happen. But there is detail about what's going to happen before, what will be taking place. I would recommend actually that lecture I was recommending earlier. That actually provides a lot more detail, and then we'll know. And if we're connected to true righteous scholars and inheritors of the Prophet ﷺ, and we're trying to work on ourselves spiritually, and we're connected, inshallah, spiritually, Allah will facilitate that for us. And as we mentioned, there will be people who will be ready to give allegiance to the Mahdi, right? And so that means that there will be general understanding of when these events are going on. And so we just have to be doing our part and preparing, and inshallah, Allah will facilitate the rest of the way for us, if that makes sense. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Any questions? You good? Okay, alhamdulillah, inshallah, we will close out with the dua. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, alhamdulillah, rabbil alameen. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. يا الله يا أرحم الراحمين، يا الله يا حفيظ، يا لطيف، يا أرحم الراحمين، يا فتاح. Ya Allah, we ask, Ya Allah, that you protect us, Ya Allah, protect us completely, and protect our families and our communities from the tribulations of this time, Ya Allah, from the fitan of this time, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Ya Allah, purify our hearts, Ya Allah, allow us hearts to be completely rectified. Ya Allah, allow us to discern when these things get more and more difficult in the times that we live in, Ya Allah. Prepare us, Ya Rabbil Alameen, Ya Allah, protect us, prepare us, increase us, Ya Rabbil Alameen, in knowledge and in dhikr and in worship of you. Allow us to devote our lives as much as possible, Ya Allah, towards you, and devote our intention and our heart and the direction of our heart, Ya Rabbil Alameen, towards you, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Ya Allah, allow us to stay closely to the sunnah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Ya Allah, let us study his sunnah, learn his sunnah, follow his sunnah, facilitate that for us, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, we are living in tough times, Ya Allah. Our children and our families and our communities are struggling immensely. There is immense fitan, Ya Allah. We ask you, Ya Rabbil Alameen, by your name Al-Latif, Ya Allah, and by your name Ar-Rahman, Ya Allah, that you pour your lutf, your gentleness and your mercy, Ya Allah, upon our societies and upon the time that we live in, Ya Rabbil Alameen, Ya Allah. Make things easy for us and guide us to the straight path. And all of those who are struggling with their deen, increase their iman, increase our yaqeen. All of us who are struggling with any aspect of our faith, fix that for us, Ya Rabbil Alameen. And specifically, Ya Allah, bless our families and our children and our parents, Ya Rabbil Alameen. We ask that you pardon our parents and forgive them, Rabbik fili wali walidayya, Ya Allah. Forgive our parents for anything that they have done. Allow us to honor them and to serve them, Ya Rabbil Alameen, and to make dua for them abundantly, Ya Rabbil Alameen, Ya Allah, and please, Ya Rabbil Alameen, please, Ya Allah, allow us to devote our life, Ya Allah, trying to serve you and trying to please you, Ya Rabbil Alameen, and please, Ya Allah, do not allow us to pass, Ya Rabbil Alameen, until you are pleased with us, Ya Rabbil Alameen, and please be gentle with us and kind with us and nurturing with us always, Ya Rabbil Alameen, and please allow us to connect with righteous scholars and allow us to discern who, Ya Rabbil Alameen, we should connect to, Ya Allah, and please give victory to the true inheritors of the Prophet ﷺ in our time that we are living in, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Ya Allah, give victory to all of the righteous ulama, Ya Rabbil Alameen, and all of the shuyukh of the spiritual paths, Ya Rabbil Alameen, Ya Allah, and allow us, Ya Rabbil Alameen, to always, 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 Ya Allah, be in ready and be on guard, Ya Rabbil Alameen, and please protect us and give us your protection completely, Ya Rabbil Alameen, and allow us to attain a state of wilaya and of ma'rifah of you. And we ask you for everything good the Prophet ﷺ asked for. We ask you protection from everything evil that we ask for. And anybody in our community who's sick, grant them a cure. Anybody in our community or in our ummah, Ya Rabbil Alameen, who has passed away recently, Ya Allah, ennoble their grave. Ya Allah, grant light in their grave, Ya Rabbil Alameen. And grant them and all of our loved ones and all of our families and us eventually Jannat al-Firdaus al-A'la with the Prophet ﷺ. Wa sallallahu wa sallam barak ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Bisir al-Fatiha ila Hadrat al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Fatiha. جزاكم الله خير.